Good afternoon, Flint Rotary. Sunny afternoon, I think still. The last few days have just been beautiful. It's been one of those days where if I have to be in the office, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat waiting so I can get home and be in the sunshine. But of course, this coming Sunday is Mother's Day. And today is Fantastic Friday, Giving Sharks a Voice Day. That's a special shout out for my son Miles, who loves sharks and knows more about them than any human being I know. It's also National Public Garden Day, and it is Limerick Day. So you know we have to honor that. So here's a limerick for you.
And Elizabeth, isn't it
Sunglasses Day.
Shades Day?
Shades Day, all right. All right, so there once was a man they called Keith, who misplaced his set of false teeth. They'd been laid on a chair, he'd forgot they were there, sat down and was bitten beneath. So today we're going to be welcoming Gary Fisher. He's from the Genesee County Historical Society. And he's going to talk about Flint's favorite food, Coney. Yes, so Flint's Coney history. And before we get to that, of course, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as Rotarians, we try to live by the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship?
Will it
All
all concerned?
right, and for our inspirational message today, we have once again David Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. So this Sunday is the day on which we honor mothers, single mothers, dads who are moms, mother-in-law, stepmothers, adoptive mothers, foster mothers. The traditional face of motherhood has changed over the years, but one thing is constant. They all in their own way take on the mantle of responsibility for raising children. Since this is the most important job on the planet, we dedicate a whole day each year to acknowledge mothers. We also have one day when we acknowledge trees, groundhogs, and in some states, raspberry jelly. And lemon. A mother is someone who has advice, not just about scissor racing or furniture trampolining or crossing your eyes or putting foreign objects in your nose. They give their children the advice they feel will help them grow into healthy, productive adults. This direction is often prayed over, discussed with other mothers, researched with grandmothers, considered and reconsidered. The advice is given with love and only the best intentions, and usually ignored by the child. A mother is someone who knows how to forgive without exacting a price, someone who kisses to make it better, even if there's sticky stuff on it, someone who gets up early to make ground bologna because her son likes it in his lunch. Mothers are usually the ones wiping the stuff off kids, regardless of what has leaked out of where. They are a lap to sit in when you need to recover from a bad game of dodgeball or a mean comment from your best friend. A mother is someone who helps you with your homework, even when it's so hard it makes you cry. A mother is someone who is patient with you when you are trying something new. Someone who knows what to say when you miss infralapsarianism in the last round of spelling contest. A mother is someone who pushes you on the swing, pushes you on your first try without training wheels, pushes you for better grades in French, pushes you to make better decisions, pushes you out the door into your own life. A mother is someone who you fill in the rest. Then get on the phone and call whoever matches that description and tell them you love them and appreciate them. And don't wait till Sunday or any day. Amen.
Thank you, David. That's terrific. And I happen to know if you do have a child who gets something stuck in their nose, there is a person here who can help with that.
My phone is going to cost me $1.
Thanks, everybody. Please enjoy your lunch, and then we'll reconvene shortly. Welcome back, everybody. So you're welcome to continue your meal here, but we're gonna get. All right, you're welcome to continue your meal, but we are gonna go ahead and get started because we have a few announcements today. And so the first is related to the Learn for Life fundraising breakfast for the library. We've mentioned this a couple of times before. Ellen's here today, and if you are intending to attend on June 5th and you haven't yet communicated with her, please connect with Ellen before you go today so that she can make sure we've got the right head count for the table that day. We have, I will say, a whole slew of Rotarians who have indicated that they wish to make a quick announcement. Since we've got so many, I'm going to ask it to be like the 30-second announcement. So if you want to just line up here, we've got Stephen Lowe, Dom Clemens, and Nick Godleski, who are each going to give their 30-second spiel.
You go first. They don't want to hear me.
We're going to spend 30 seconds arguing over who gets to go first.
On your tables, you'll find a flyer for a concert that's being held in my yard next Thursday. These are fantastic musicians. Yale is a musicologist, a music ethnographer, and a great violinist. He plays klezmer and Eastern European and African music. He's a professor at San Diego State. His wife's voice has been compared to Edith Piaf, and they have a fantastic guitarist. There's no charge, but I'd love to have you come. Please do RSVP so I know how much snacks to have. Hope to see you there.
What day is that?
Thursday.
Thursday, good, because on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, after you see Stephen Lowe's thing, this weekend and next weekend. I am playing bass in the orchestra for Clio Casting Crew show 2x2. It's the old Danny Kaye Broadway from 45 years ago, or maybe more. And it's hilarious. It's a blast. I'm having a fun time doing it, and I've never done anything like this before. So I would love it if you guys could come and support. In Clio Casting Crew is like across the street from the old movie theater in Clio. And give me a ring if you have any questions or what else. Tickets, call Clio. I don't have a flyer.
I also don't have a flyer. Not quite as fun, but for those of you that are civically minded, we have an important community town hall that's coming up. It is going to be a bipartisan event that is going to focus on the certification process and the steps that are taken in the election. From what happens once that ballot is cast to the point where you see results and how those results are certified. Myself, the Genesee County Clerk, is going to be sitting on the panel, as well as our chair of our Board of Canvassers, Norma Escu, who also represents the Republican Party on the Board of Canvassers, as well as the Deputy Clerk of Grand Lake Township, Lynn Henry, to just provide the community information on the steps that go into election security and certification. And that date is Tuesday, May 16th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the Flint Public Library.
All right, thank you everybody for sharing information. That's one of the benefits of being part of a group like Rotary is you got lots of cool people who are connected to lots of cool things, and we get to hear more about it. So whether you are musically inclined or into the theater or civic engagement, you've got opportunities before you. All right, so I also want to take a few moments here. I think Anne Marie's on Zoom, and if she wants, she's welcome to unmute. We wanted to provide another opportunity now that you've had a couple of weeks since the club assembly to look at the various materials that have been sent, including, you saw this past week, sent out the actual text of proposed bylaws changes. These are proposed changes that the club will have the opportunity to vote on a week from today. So this is an opportunity to have any questions answered that you might have about that. And Anne Marie, if you're there and you want to to add anything to that, you're welcome to it. All right, and we may have had to sign off. But just to do a quick recap. The bylaws changes fall into 3 different categories. One are the kinds of updates that are required to reflect the actual changes in committee structure that we've already adopted in practice this year. So, correcting the names of committees essentially. The second category of changes is removing language specifying club meetings every Friday at noon. That's to give us the flexibility to be able to adapt the meeting structure. And we outlined before kind of what the proposed meeting structure is starting in July. That we would retain our traditional Friday lunch meetings at noon on the second and fourth Friday. The first week of the month would be a service opportunity. And the third Thursday of the month would be social networking. That would be more of an evening affair. So that's the second type of change in the bylaw. And then the third would be just to change the language around when is payment due to make it clear that we could have a monthly kind of installment plan option available. Any questions or additional thoughts? I know people shared some initial feedback last time, but I just want to make sure if anybody's got any questions about this, that you've got the chance to raise that so that you can be fully informed for next week. If not, all right, then thank you. I'm going to then pass it to past President George Ananik, who has some information to share regarding the district conference.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I think you may have received a save the date notification in your email a few times. That was for the district conference, and we're finally starting to get it organized enough that we can publish some things and show you what's we have in plan for that event. But what I'd like to point out, first of all, for those who don't know, this is our district. It runs from Genesee County, which is on the right-hand side, over to London, Ontario, right? All the way up to Bruce Sound. Is that what's at the top there, Mike? Hindsight, yeah. So our district is pretty big, and there's quite a bit of space on the Canadian side. So, we're kind of a mixed international club, so we have that uniqueness about us. And so we're trying to use that as part of our efforts in this district conference. Okay. The reason we're hosting the district conference is that our district governor, Mike Chafee, is from our club. So it's our obligation to host that conference. And that's what we're doing. It's going to be at the Gateway Hotel and Convention Center, June 23rd through the 25th. And one of the things we want to try to do is explore how Rotarians and others are addressing climate issues. One of the newest focuses of Rotary is environmental issues. So we're going to focus on that for our conference as well. The other thing we want to do is explore some fellowship with other Rotarians in our district, learn more about the Rotary experience. And I think until you sit at the table from someone from another district or another club, you really don't understand Rotary or understand how other people see it. So this is a good interaction between members. The other thing we want to do is to learn things and be inspired by our speakers and programs, and also to have some fun. Now, we do have a kind of a nice website. We're this close to having it launched, and we do have a sample. I'll show you a little bit later, and that'll be our registration website. So why should you be there? This is a call to action for our club. We want to represent the second largest club in our district, right? We want to represent like second place. No, we don't. We want to represent like first place, like where we were. London, Ontario, I think has the biggest club. Yeah, Stratford, okay. So we want to have more people from the Flint club than Stratford has. So please make every effort you can to be there. We're not only doing that, but we're representing Flint and Genesee County and all the great things that are happening here. And probably the biggest thing is to support our district governor and thank him for all he's done as the district governor this year. Me? And the other thing we want to do is have you be part of a peaceful transition out. So just kind of a fair warning, don't bring any of your own flags or banners. We'll have that all taken care of. And I'm pretty sure we're going to change from this year's district governor to the next year's district governor. So don't get any crazy ideas. This is just, I don't expect you to read all that. This is our agenda. We're running from, the conference is going to start Friday afternoon on the 23rd. And what the idea is that we'll have a Rotary Club meeting at the convention center. And we're going to invite everyone that's attending the conference to that meeting as well. So it's going to be one big happy family. So again, show up. It'll be on Friday. So after that, we're going to make a transition from the regular meeting to the conference. And we'll start with our speakers. We have a couple of great speakers in the afternoon. Saturday, we have a number of things. We've got a full calendar. We're running all day with speakers and events. And Sunday, we'll finish up with some of the Rotary business that Mike and Sonia Class will be taking over for the rest of the conference. The speakers list. So here are some people who think it's important enough to show up. Our guest speaker on Friday will be the mayor of Flint. Will be our keynote speaker. That afternoon, we're also going to have Michael Kelly from the Conservation Fund. That group is a grantee of CS Mott Foundation, who deal with a lot of freshwater initiatives, particularly in the Great Lakes and Lake Huron. Saturday, we're going to have Ed Denning, who's going to come in and talk about their alternative fuel vehicles. Then Dr. McMahon from Kettering University is going to come in and talk about their autonomous vehicle operations. In the afternoon, we're going to have a panel discussion with Consumers Energy and Bruce Power, which is a nuclear power plant in Bruce. I don't know where Bruce. They're Bruce in Canada. So what we're trying to do here is again, this is an international event. I want to get people on both sides cooperating and be part of this. So I think we've got a nice mix with Bruce Power and Consumers Energy is going to talk about alternative fuels and those sort of things. And then finally, our last session on Saturday will be with the Flint River Watershed Coalition and the Great Lakes Plastic Cleanup Group. And again, this Flint River obviously is our local effort to clean up, and the Great Lakes is the Toronto-based group that does a lot of work with riparian groups. Yeah, we'll have several breakout sessions with that as well. So we've got a lot of things planned out, but we still need help. These are a few things that I still need. I need someone to help with some counting, a photographer, some golf outing volunteers, and a few other things, game day type of help. So we'll be looking, I'll be coming around, tapping you on the shoulder and asking very politely if you'll help us out. And then also we'll have some sponsorship opportunities, and these will be delineated a little bit better, where we can look for some contributions to help offset the cost of some of these things in the conference. Okay. Website. So we've done a lot of work here, and we've had some great help. Brian and Dave and Dennis Dinsmore and a few other people setting up the registration part of this conference. And it's all completely online. And this is just the This is the prototype, but so, can I scroll? Oh, there's Mike, I missed it.
Oh, yeah, that does.
Except for that one picture. So we'll have our agendas up here. Come on now. And when you go to it, we're gonna send out a notice of when that's up and running. So we'll have our agenda, our speakers, what we're talking about, the times, the itinerary, registration for the hotel, other activities in the area. So if you bring a spouse or someone from out of town brings their spouse, there's things for them to do, different events and a lot of fun things. So it's going to be a full weekend with a lot of fun things to do and a lot of great speakers. So I really hope that you will attend and help us out. And with that, I think that's about it. Unless anybody has any questions. Oh, the cost. The cost is going to be for the 3-day conference, which is going to include all the speakers, events, and things like that. Plus food is $150. We are going to offer a 1-day reduced cost for Saturday at $125. Again, that includes all your meals for that day. And the hotel would be on your own. Well, you may not, but so there's a different registration for the conference, is one registration, the hotel's registration. So that'll be a cost for those attendees.
The golf is additional too, George.
Right, oh yeah, I forgot. We are gonna have the opportunity to golf Friday morning at Flint Golf Club. So we made arrangements. We only have spots for 50 people. So you want to register early for that if you want to golf. But also kind of keep in mind that we've got folks coming from Canada who might want to golf there, and maybe we go to the back of the line. Just asking, saying, and make it an opportunity for them because we only have 50 spaces.
Okay.
All right, so before we get to the 50-50 raffle, I see Rob ready to come up here. Just wanted to make a special announcement. We have 2 people who are retiring today from the food bank. One of whom is decked out in sash and tiara here. Congratulations, Connie. Was here just a second ago, and I think maybe somewhere else in the building, but if you see her, congratulate her because today is also Cynthia's last day. Cynthia is the person who has prepared and served our meal for us last a couple of years, and today's her last. We are standing between her and retirement. So please offer her your hearty congratulations when you see her. And now it's time for the raffle.
I guess next one up too. No, we don't have cards to give away today though.
No
It's not
cards.
as fun.
No.
George, can you borrow your car again?
Can I borrow your car keys?
I
don't know what we're doing.
I want to also just mention that we have folks on Zoom. We have Joe Martin here, Anne Marie, Lauren Coney, and Jerry Noodle, I think are all our Zoomers. So welcome to our Zoom.
Can we use your phone for 3rd place?
Okay.
Oh.
How nice. 3rd place, 7150999. 7150999. That's Jerry. Jerry Hill. He's got the lucky.
No, Ellen has the lucky streak. Didn't you win all of them one day? Thank you very much.
Everything.
Good luck to you.
All of that. All right, so second prize is 714837. Terry,
I'm digging deep.
and for all the, what is it, all the
First place.
Marbles
All of
here.
marbles.
715227. Come
on, Brian, call me out.
All right, that brings us to our featured guest speaker today, and to introduce him is Duncan Eagle.
Well, good afternoon, Rotary. Enjoying the nice weather. Several weeks ago, I had an opportunity on a Saturday to go to a program that was entitled Pony Culture. It sounded like it might be interesting with some history of Flint. So it was so well attended that I invited our speaker today, Gary Fisher, to give a modified version of that event so that we're out of here in a time and fashion. Gary's president of the Tennessee County Historical Society. In fact, I think he's got some magazines. If some of you don't look at that magazine, he's got a few for you. Now, despite the tough times of Flint, I think the number of people that have a passion for our inner city and so forth has probably dwindled. I've not met anybody in the last several years that has more of a passion and love for the city of Flint than Gary Fisher. He's just amazing. His family has been in the Flint area for over 110 years. I think your great grandfather worked at Buick and many other relatives worked at Buick. Gary's a successful business owner, financial advisor, and a public speaker. He's a proud graduate of that school down the road here, Flint Central. Got his bachelor's at the University of Michigan and his master's at the Central Michigan University. Gary has a podcast, and Gary, you can let him know when you get up here what days and time and what it is. I don't want to take any more of his time. I think you'll find it interesting. Those of you that did grow up in Flint, you'll get a real history lesson as to what Pony Island did to help with the expansion of our community. So Gary, let's have a nice warm welcome to Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Eagle. Appreciate that. So the podcast is also a radio show. It's called Fish and the Flint Chronicles, and it's on WFNT 1470 AM. Wednesdays at 11, Saturdays at 4 o'clock. And much to my amazement, when we started doing it, it actually streams all over the world. So we have listeners on, I don't even know how many, last time we checked, like 30 countries listen to the live stream. If you go to WFNT.com, you can hear it. And then it's also on flintchronicles.com. So we're almost to our 250th show. So we post every show that we've done on there. And it's had people we've had on there has been unbelievable. If you're passing through Flint, you're required to be on the show. That's my rule. So the actor Billy Bob Thornton was doing a one-night gig at the machine shop. I found out who his agent was. I called her up and I said, I think there's been a mistake. I see Billy Bob's not booked any time on Fish and the Flint Chronicles. And she said, what is Fish and the Flint Chronicles? I said, well, it's the premier radio show about Flint, Michigan. How could you not know that? And she started laughing and she said, well, I'll see what we can do. And she got him there. So we've had him on. Mark Wahlberg, the actor, has been on the show. Mark Ingram, the Heisman Trophy winner. Jimmy Abbott, the one-handed superstar that threw a no-hitter for the New York Yankees, and tons of other people. So the whole idea behind it is to celebrate the history of our community of Flint and Genesee County. And, it's interesting, when I did the first few shows, I had a buddy who has moved here from somewhere else, but he's all about the community and he loves Flint. And he said, I've listened to those shows you've done. He goes, are you going to keep doing the show? And I said, yeah, why wouldn't I? As long as it's fun. And he says, well, he was trying to say, you're going to run out of people to have on the show. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, you have like 6 people worthy of hearing their stories? We'll never run out of stories. We'll never run out of people, because this community has had such an incredible and inordinate impact on not just America, but the world at large. And that story, that narrative has gotten lost amidst the if it bleeds, it leads mentality. Our community's had a lot of challenges, but so have other communities. It's just that we tend to focus on that here. Growing up, Flint's a tough town. And I used to say there was the Flint look, and it had something like gritted teeth. It was kind of just that kind of a thing. But we've tended to be overly tough on ourselves. It's okay to be tough on other people and other events, but we go really hard on ourselves here. And so I got frustrated with it, and that's how the radio show came about. I joined the Genesee County Historical Society. And then I started doing a talk called Boys Under the Hood. And they had me on the radio to talk about it, and they asked me if I wanted to have my own show, and they gave me a microphone, which is a big mistake, because I wanted to go. So, and then we started doing a magazine, which was Judge Beagle mentioned, which is called The Historian. We have a copy for everybody that wants one right over there. My shameless pitch is for you to join the Genesee County Historical Society. It's $30 per person. And you can go right to where it says membership matters, and you can scan the little QR code, or you can go to geneseehistory.org, which is our awesome website, and sign up there. And if you do that, we'll send you the magazine every time it comes out directly to your house. And you get first option to come to our events like the Coney Culture event. So what I wanted to do, I've been the president, this is my third year now being the president, and I wanted to make sure that we celebrate all of Genesee County, because while I'm a fanatic for the old stories of Billy Durant, Louis Chevrolet, and David Buick, which one of my favorite topics on earth, there's a lot more to the community than that, whether it's music or sports, the arts, culture. Those are things that really don't get talked about much, it seems like, unless there's some negative connotation. So we wanted to highlight all of those things. Most people don't realize the impact that Flint's had in all those areas. Flint used to be the Nashville of the North. You know, and one of the top country music recording set studios were right here in Flint. The Honolulu Conservatory of Music. Has anyone heard of that? One person? My dad used to tell me he went to the Hawaii Conservatory in Flint, and I thought he hit his head somewhere. There was no such place. And then one day I saw a black and white picture of a parade in downtown Flint from 1940. In the back was a lit up sign that said Honolulu Conservatory of Music. And I don't need to tell the truth. You got the city. Yeah, because they give me the right name. So I Googled it, and as it turns out, they invented there, it became the greatest, most successful music franchise in the history of the world. There are fans to this day all over the world for the Honolulu Conservatory of Music, and they invented a form of guitar playing there that you'll hear on things like the theme from Hawaii Five-0. It became very prominent in country and Western music. Dusty Owens was considered one of the greatest country and Western stars in the world, and he came straight out of Flint. And of course, Flint's been the home for everything from country music to gangster rap to Grand Funk Railroad and Mark Farmer and everybody else. So that's just one little component of it, and we try to tell that story. And then when we got into talking about cultural things, I thought, well, how do you, I'm going around telling everybody Flint has the best athletes, cars, and cones. And people go, okay, how are you going to prove that? Well, it's easy to prove. But I thought we'd do a program to really go into the history of it. And so there was a book written recently that was okay, it had like a lot of not factual stuff in it, but it was okay. I gave the guy points for trying. And a lot of the miscommunication stemmed from an article that was in the Flint Journal in 1978 that was about how the Coney business got started, and it created an internal furor among the Coney families that never got publicly addressed. That I only found out when I went on Cars 108 and somebody thought to promote our event, and somebody thought I'd given incorrect information. You talk about passion. They wanted that story told right. So I started talking to the Coney families and realized that there's what was described to me as there's a bit of an internal war about the history of the Coney Islands. So I took it upon myself to try to find out exactly what that history was. And then more than anything, celebrate and tell the story of how the Coney Island culture in Flint impacted not just the city, but the state. And really, I think I'll make the case, and Judge, you could be the judge of that we actually saved the world for democracy with Coney Island. So you'll have to tell me if I was able to litigate that case appropriately. So, and I know I don't have a lot of time, and this is a little bit longer story, so I'll try to be as brief as possible and still tell you the story. So in 1907 in Bay City, Michigan, let me go back even further. In New York, on Coney Island, there was an individual there named Feltman, and Feltman decided that he made sausages. And Feltman was a German Jew, and he was an expert in making sausages. And so that was kind of a family business that went back to the old country. And he said, well, how do you he saw all this influx of people in New York, and he thought, well, how do I sell them on the boardwalk? You can't just pass out sausages. That would be a greasy mess. So he thought he'd put them in a bun. So he did. And his form of sausage, he called a red hot. That was the form of the Coney Island. And a guy that worked for him, it was named Nathan, and Nathan had invented a worker bee for Feltman. He decided he started his own business, and he called it Nathan's Famous. And I can't remember his last name, so forgive me, but it's on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, you know him as Nathan. If you've been to New York City, you probably had a Nathan's Famous. And he just copied what Feltman had been doing. He marketed it differently, but they were called Red Hots, and they became very successful. And as the immigrants came to New York, the Macedonian and Greek immigrants in particular took note of this phenomenon. Thought, hey, this is something maybe we could use to help bring our families over and to create a business foothold in the United States. So they came of all places to Michigan, and the first one we've been able to find, I'm not gonna say it is the first one, because we keep learning new things, but it was in Bay City, Michigan, at the Winona Beach Arcade. And it was in 1907 when they started serving Coney Island Red Hots. And then that took hold, and then another one popped up in Jackson, Michigan. And then down in Detroit, there was the Lafayette American Coney Island. And then in Flint, Michigan, there was the Flint Coney Island. First Coney Island in Flint was on Saginaw Street, right about where the U of M dorms are now. That used to be the Hyatt Regency Hotel. Right in that area. And ironically enough, that's the very location of the Todd Tavern, which was the first place that sold hot food to travelers, along with the pint of the ale. And the Todd Tavern was made famous by Alexis de Tocqueville, who was a famous French culture commentator, I guess, who came to America and wrote a book called Democracy in America, and he wanted to see what this whole democracy thing was about. So on his travels, he went down to the Paris of the Midwest, which is Detroit, and he set up shop there, and with a little crew, he started going up the Saginaw Trail, which we know as Saginaw Street. So he got to Flint, it started getting dark. He was kind of looking through some shrubs, trying to find this Todd Tavern where they could get a meal and a bed, because taverns in those days gave you a meal and a bed. And they found it, they saw the light, they started walking towards it, and at that very moment, a gigantic grizzly bear reared up right in their face, roaring, and they thought they were done for. And all of a sudden, the door slams open, and a woman comes out and says, "Drink, sit," and the grizzly sat. And the grizzly was attached to an anchor chain. And Tocqueville wrote in his book, "What a Country This America Is," where they have grizzly bears for watchdogs. And I thought, that's the ultimate Flint story. Oh, you have pit bulls? How cute. Scary, right? We have grizzly bears. So the Todd Tavern sits right approximately where the Flint Coney Island is. So for years, this whole thing came about, like, well, where did how they invent the pony sauce, where did it come from? And this is where the controversy becomes kind of prevalent. So it was argued inside the family. The family was started by George Brown was his name, and he had a partner named Simeon or Sam Brand, and Brand and Brown are synonymous. They're just kind of an alteration of the name Branoff, which was a name that came from Macedonia. When the Greeks and the Macedonians had sort of culture clash, the Greeks sort of insisted that the Macedonians take on Greek names, but the Macedonians secretly kept their Greek name or their Macedonian names. So Angelo Popoff, who was one of the owners of Angelo's Coney Island, his real name is Angelo Papadopoulos. His daughter, who was my friend growing up, was Mary Papadopoulos, which I was trying to figure out why his name was Popoff, and I had to do a whole entire culture study to figure out why their names were different. So the Greeks were on one side of the Coney culture, and the Macedonians were on the other side for the most part. So at this restaurant called Flint Coney Island, George Brown started selling. His ad in the Flint Journal said, "We bring Coney Island to Flint," and they were featuring hamburgers and Red Hots with snappy chili sauce, which, by the way, is not Coney sauce, because nobody knew what a Coney was at that time. Now, this part of the controversy is 2 years later, Sam Bryan comes to town, Sam Bryan actually, and the Bryan family feels that he was already here illegally, working with Brown to set up Flint Coney Island, and that he created the actual Flint Coney sauce. And the Flint Journal perpetuated this because in 1978, he did a huge spread on the Coney culture, and in the front of the newspaper was Sam Bryan, 88 years old, with a bow tie, holding up a little dish with a Coney on it. All of the other the kingpin Coney owners arrayed behind him, and right next to his picture it says Sam Bryan invented the Flint Coney sauce. Well, apparently that started an internal furor because the Brown family does not accept that Sam Bryan. They're not sure he did anything. He was one of the owners, but he's kind of out here. That George Brown invented it, but when I talked with Phil Brown, who was George's son, he said, well, it was kind of an innovation, but he didn't give any credit to Sam. He said, actually, Steve George was the only person, he was another owner that was allowed to touch the Coney sauce. So I said, was there any documentation? He said, no, Dad didn't write anything down. He didn't believe in writing anything down. So there's no old recipes, there's no diaries, there's no family history. And by the way, they just thought they were running the business, didn't they? Your future president of the Historical Society is going to be seeing how they kept the world safer in a democracy. They were just running a business. They didn't keep track of it. But one thing's for sure, they started selling snappy chili sauce on top of a Red Hot. And at some point in that process, somebody, I personally believe it was a group decision, that they decided to put this, to change the chili sauce to make it more like Macedonian goulash, which is what we call dry Flint Coney sauce. So I think everybody's right. I think George Brown did start the restaurant, in all likelihood. He may or may not have had help from Sam Bryan. That at some point, they were the owners, they had to agree on a sauce change, you can't really credit it to one person. And the reason that the Brown family says that Brandon got the credit is because George was dead. So he wasn't there to defend himself. So the reality is, I think they're all right. I think the reality is that they started that. That's indisputable. And out of the Flint Coney Islands sprouted all of the other Coney Islands. The most famous being Angelo's Coney Island, which took over the old post office Coney Island in 1949 at the corner of Davison and Franklin, and became an institution unto itself. Started by Angelo Nikoloff, who was a cook at Flint Coney Island, who, and this tells you how there's always two stories. It's kind of like the Billy Grant story. There's always two stories for how Billy Grant did this or that to form General Motors. Same thing with the Coney story. One story says that the person who owned the pharmacy right across the street that came to be known as Franklin Pharmacy, and a dentist gave the funding to Angelo Nikoloff to start Angelo's Coney Island. And when I mentioned that to a family member of one of the other owners of Angelo, she said, I'm not so sure about that story. So there's always two sides to the story, but the story that they gave me the funding makes sense to me, because there's a pharmacy. Hamady Brothers was over here, you had a dentist over here. It was great to bring more people to be attracted to that corner. Why not have a thriving business? So whether they got the money from one source or another, Angelo's Coney Island started in 1949, and it literally took on a life of its own. And it was in the perfect place anywhere to be a Coney Island. You had Buick over here, you had AC Spark Plug over here, a little bit to the southwest, you had Chevrolet or Chevy in the hole, and a little bit further down Saginaw Street, you had Fisher Body. So you had all of these people working 3 shifts and making okay incomes. No one was getting rich working on the line at any one of those plants, but they were making good blue collar wages. And what better blue collar food is there than a Coney Island? Fries and gravy, or a cheeseburger, or my favorite, a cheeseburger deluxe with grilled onions, 2 ponies with everything, and fries and gravy. And yes, I did eat that regularly, which explains my large pants now. But when I was young, I had 29-inch waist, so it must have been healthy for young people only. I don't know, but so that started the whole process of all these Coneys sprouting up all over the community. And they were in every side of the city. They served the workers, and this is where my story gets a little expansive, because what I was told by Phil Wright is that the railroads, which Flint Coney Island, right between these 2 railroads, the railroad workers would always stop in Flint, because you had Grand Trunk and Father Marquette. And they started to complain a little that the Red Hots needed to be more robust. And that's when they started making them specifically with the sauce, because now you're kind of getting your chili on a sausage, which eventually became a Coney frame when Kogels collaborated either with the Brown story is with George Brown alone, or the Brain story is with Sam Brain alone, or I think probably with all of them. And Al Kogel decided we're going to make a special frame, a special dog just for the Coney Islands. And the reason they did that is because the regular Viennas that everybody, the average citizen thinks is a Coney dog is not. Because those burn on the grill, they split, they get black, and a Coney frame won't. So it has different ingredients, and you can sit them on the grill for a lot longer without them getting ruined. So hence the Coney frame. Mr. Bread came along, took over for a bakery in the St. John's neighborhood, and that fell victim to urban renewal. And they created a 7-inch bun that fit the Coney frame perfect. So there were, and then you had Moffitt Spices, which was a stone business actually, and they provided all the spices for the Coney Islands. And hence the culture grew until it became a part. Just like people that grew up in Flint, what do you call a brown paper bag? Oh, right there, you should videotape this. No one will believe it, right? I told that to somebody that examining around the whole country calling them handy sacks. I'm like, yeah, it's weird not to. Like, what else would it be? What's it's a handy sack, right? So the Coney culture became ubiquitous, and the railroad workers got their heavy duty treats, right? Well, enter World War II, and you have a very serious situation, which most people don't realize. We were completely and totally unprepared for World War II. The German Wehrmacht had 8 million men under arms, far ahead of us in every possible area. That's why Albert Einstein wrote his famous letter to FDR and said, these guys are working on an atom bomb. Let me tell you what that means, which started the Manhattan Project, which, just as an aside, one of the cool things they get to do with the Historical Society and the radio show is interview people that I never get to know. And there's an individual who we interviewed here, who turns out his dad worked on the Manhattan Project. He worked at AC Spark Plug. His mom and dad met there during the Manhattan Project. He has a letter that he gave me from Robert Oppenheimer thanking his dad for helping to invent, literally it says, the atom bomb. If you ever need a reference, your guy Oppenheimer says. So I'm pretty sure his dad did very well. So there's all this history, but here's the problem. We weren't ready to make anything. We weren't ready to fight any kind of war. We didn't know how to make cartridges. So Buick figured out a way to make cartridges with the tools that were available at the time. Buick and General Motors also bought this big plot of land on Grand Lake to build B-24 bombers, but there weren't enough workers. They had to start importing workers. So they shipped that part off to Chicago and made the engines for the B-24s here. And later that area became the tank plant, where they built Shermans and Pershings, and downtown at Buick, they were building the Hellcats. And those are the tanks that got us off the beach at Normandy. Those are the tanks that basically let us actually continue on the march into Berlin. And without that, which became the backbone of the arsenal of democracy, which was General Motors, the auto industry first, GM in particular, of course, that's invented by Billy Grant. So there's no Flint, there's no Billy Grant, there's no GM, there's no GM, you might not win the war. And who built all this stuff to win the war? Well, that'd be all the workers that were in Flint. What was fueling them? We have a winner. Now, I didn't have a lot of time to make the case, where I could have had visuals and PowerPoints and maybe some acrobatics, but instead I had to talk very quickly, but I think I made my point. That Coney Islands, in no small way, kept the world free, defeated Adolf Hitler, ended Mussolini, finished off Imperial Japan, and created the American century. And just to make, not to put too fine of a point on it, but who fed the workers during the golden era in Flint when the 50 million Buick rolled off, Chevy rolled off, 50 million GM car was a Chevrolet, and the first Corvette, which by the way, the birthday of that's coming up next month, the 70th birthday of the invention of the Corvette, invented by you. You said, Flint guys, you'd be correct. Because that's exactly who invented the Corvette after inventing the arsenal of democracy. And why could they invent the Corvette? Because the arsenal of democracy created this massive backbone of workers imported from places like Black Arkansas. And black workers that weren't given any opportunity in the South, that were given a chance to come here and work. Or people like some of my relatives that came here as dirt farmers, who were given an opportunity to have a middle class lifestyle because of that. And winning the war and building our democracy is the main reason workers got really great wages. Most people think it was the sit-down strike. It was not the sit-down strike. They were already the highest paid blue collar workers on the planet Earth during the sit-down strike, just to be completely clear on that point. And the things they won during that were very minimal. They won some work rule benefits. It's kind of a UAW became their negotiating chieftain, but they didn't really get the benefits that we think of as union benefits until after the Second World War. That's when Ruther went to Alfred Sloan and said, okay, dude, I don't think he said dude, but it sounds better if I say dude. He said, okay, dude, you are the second American company to have a net $1 billion profit. It's time to give us some benefits. And Sloan finally acquiesced and said, what do you want? We want health insurance, we want a pension, and we want better wages. And the main thing they got was great health insurance and better pensions, because GM didn't have to include those on their books. They were off the books, non-liabilities, and it didn't hurt the company's stock price in any way, shape, or form. And it was stuff that would be paid way down the road. And the union used that as a great negotiating bit and never relented from it, right? Regardless of what the market share was or what was happening in the auto industry, those things continued to get better. And when they had to include them on their balance sheet, which was 1986, that's when things started to go a little south. But that's another presentation for another day. I just want to point out that those workers that built the arsenal of democracy, that built those plants and those factories, that gave us the infrastructure to even have an arsenal of democracy, were fueled by Coney Islands. Because that is the point of our story today. So the rest of the story with Coney Islands is it sort of tracks the history of Flint. And as the suburbs became a thing, especially in the 60s, that's when places like Starlight, Coney Island, you might be familiar with them, over on Center Road, 1966. And then the Genesee Valley opened up, and you had the Palace, Coney Island out there. And then you get some of the best Coneys as time has gone on, when people that haven't been around for a long time, they go, can I get a really good Coney? When I was telling Grandpa, it was almost like sacrilege. I'm like, well, that's the next Angeles people making them there. Oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So the reality is now, because of all this focus on health and fitness, there's been a little bit less emphasis placed on Coney Island. But I will be the first one to tell you that if you're going to eat anything that's not necessary, Dr. Bobby, I don't, you can't speak on this at all. So if you're going to eat anything that's not exactly the most healthy thing in the world, I would suggest strongly that you go with fries and gravy, a cheeseburger deluxe with grilled onions, and 2 Coneys with everything. And you can tell your cardiologist, the president of the Genesee County said it was A-OK.
Where do you think the best one is right
Well, I think the best Coney that you can get right now is probably at Starlight, Coney Island. And the reason for that is Cooksey Popoff, who is the owner of that, is the direct descendant of all these people. And actually, I'm a big Michigan football fan, and so we went to get season tickets. And the tailgate I used to go to rotate making Coney sauce, rotate making food for the tailgate. So when it came my turn, of course, it was Coney's, right? So we have a hot Coney sauce going, my wife and I, and little Tracy's the cook. I'm more the eater in the family. She's the cook. And this guy walks up, because some guy wants to test your Coney sauce out. And I'm from Flint, man, keep in mind, that's my only stop. And it was Tom Brandhoff, one of the others, and so it's coming, genuflected, started shaking. And then Brandhoff walked up and looked at me and puts the spoon in, takes a taste, he goes, it's all right. And one other thing, so Starlight Coney Island donated the Coney sauce for our event, and Mr. Brett gave us a great deal, like so was the buns it cost. And Jim Lay and his wife Harriet, Jim's the general manager of Kogel's, they purchased, I'm sure at a pretty good deal from, because he's the general manager of Kogel's, they purchased the Coney thing. So we had a lot of our stuff provided, no cost or very inexpensive. And Mary Papadopoulos, who I mentioned, was one of my oldest friends. Costa or Quixie, as we call him, is her cousin. And so she called, she said, she was in Southern California, she was flying into the event, and her dad is Angelo Papa of Angelo, one of the last owners, one of the crew of the last real owners, in my opinion. And Mary said, well, I called Quixie and told him the sauce better be spot because dad's gonna be there. I said, is it ever not spot on? So that, depends on what day it is. So that's the best Coney. And I have to say that's there's nobody else close. Sophia's Kitchen in Grand Blanc is a pretty good Coney. That family used to own Ambassador Coney Island on the south side, but that's another pretty good one. I mean, I don't know if there's any after that. It's kind of a dying art, sadly. A lot of the places are closed. Yeah, well, anyone that's using the original, and let me just say this about the original ingredients too, because there's a lot of what's the actual Coney sauce. We can credit the Flint Journal for another bit of this information. There was a woman whose name escapes me, but I guarantee you people in the room remember her. She ran a very popular column in the Flint Journal about food. And she published in the 70s, I think it was first published in 73 or 74, The Secret Angelo's Coney Sauce. And she said she got it from a woman who took it from a recipe book of her husband who used to be a cook at Angelo's. And it's all a lie. The whole recipe is totally not the recipe. It included chopped up hot dogs and all other kinds of nonsense. That is still being posted on Facebook to this day and probably will for the rest of all time. That is not the recipe for the Coneys. So to get to the actual recipe, when I did the radio show, I did a series. I had Angelo Popoff is on the show, and a guy who made the Coney sauce at Angelo's is on the show. So I interviewed people that was their job. One guy, Don Mockey, did it for 15 years. And so my wife being the foodie, she runs the board for the radio show, and she slowed him down and asked what size spoon did you use? What size was this? And then when I talked to Mary and Angelo, we asked them the same question. So the actual proper Coney sauce is not what the Flint Journal published. Probably not what we've seen on the interwebs, on Facebook and stuff like that. So can you make your own? You can, but you have to have some connection at Kogel's to get the Coney Frank, because you don't get the Coney Frank. It has to have a Coney Frank from Kogel's, obviously, a 7-inch bun from Mr. Bread, and then the Coney sauce. I would suggest Angelo's. I will say in Apollo out in Mount Morris, actually is pretty close too. That's another one that has pretty good Coney sauce. Yeah, and yes, I do have the recipe, and it'll be my forthcoming book, Secret Recipes from Flint. So you'll have to wait for that a little bit. Yes, no, we do have it. I'm writing an article in the next Historian magazine is coming out next month. And in it, I'm going to do an article on all of this, Coney culture. I have not decided yet if I'm going to include the recipe, and not for any profit motive, because I'm doing this for any profit, which is probably why I would do Warren Buffett. But we don't make any money at it. But what we do have is a lot of passion. And the reason I tell you that is, for example, the other article I'm writing is on the greatest athletes in Flint history. So I did off memory, I did the top 100 athletes in Flint history about 5 years ago on Facebook, and I started getting messages from pro athletes. Why was I only ranked 29? Who did this list? How did you come up with number 11? Why is, I mean, they take it serious, right? And it's funny, Paul Krause, who I consider the greatest athlete to ever come out of this area, was interviewed on another radio show, and somebody asked him, well, who do you think the best athlete ever in Flint history? He's like, well, there's so many good ones. So he was my dad's best friend growing up, and I know damn good well Paul Krause, like Paul Krause is the greatest athlete. And that's a fact. And I agree with him, I actually agree. The other side of it is the Coney sauce. So where I'm on the fence is I published the Coney sauce in the article, and I'm not going to keep it a secret. I'm just not sure I'm going to do an historian, because there will be people who I'll be deceived with people who say it was a Flint Journal in 1973. It's nice up hot dogs. So, and the focus really is on the actual culture. So at some point, I won't be the one to tell you, I will let the people that made it speak for themselves, and they can give the actual pony sauce. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm from Detroit and we have a Detroit pony.
Oh, yes.
And a Flint pony.
Yes.
And I'm kind of torn between the two, but Lafayette.
Yes.
It's always a pleasure to go downtown and have the Lafayette ponies, and there's it's the ingredients in the sauce is really interesting. I know, I can't tell you that offhand, I have it written at home. There's some weird things into those sauces.
Yeah, as they say, you should never go see how the sausage is made. And you remember Bob I'll say one thing and then I'll relinquish the mic. Is it Talbert or Talbot? I think it's Talbert, was a very prominent columnist for the Detroit Free Press and a Detroiter from Wade to Talbot. Yeah, Talbert, very prominent, probably their number one sort of celebrity columnist for I think it was the Free Press. And he's a Detroiter, grew up in Detroit through and through. So he took on the task of picking the world's best Coney Island. This was 1987. And it was a major media event. It was covered by all the local TV stations, all the papers were there. And the winner was announced at Angelo's Coney Island. And Bob Talbert announced that the greatest Coney, he said something to the effect of, there could never be anything more perfect than an Angelo's Coney Island. So I had heard about it. I'm not. Yes.
Comment, as a displaced Bostonian, when I first arrived here about 50 years ago, I think the second week I was here, a couple of my friends said, Rob, I'm gonna take you to a Coney Island. My comment was, you get an amusement park here? So I was then confused.
I love hearing those stories.
It's not real.
Thank you so much. Yes, please grab a magazine on your way out if you would be so inclined. Thank you, everybody today who helped out with today's meeting. So David Smith, Dave Perry, Mike Chapey, Terry Mormon, and also pinch hitting for the raffle, Rob Bennett, as well as Dick Godleski. Come back next week, May 19th. We're going to have Joe Sarah here from Sarah Automotive, and we hope that you will join us at that time. In the meantime, thank you again so much to our guest speaker. A contribution will be made in your honor towards the eradication of polio. And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody on Zoom.
Yeah.